What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics. And thanks for tuning in tonight. You're tuning in to a BC Lions post-game recap show. And oh boy, this is going to be a tough one that both of us do not want to go through. Hopefully, a recap show. You're not hearing me twice.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Cole. You were fine to start, and then something happened, and now you're breaking up a bit.
Um,
So that sounds a little bit better.
you go, or you just talk for a little bit because I'm hearing myself twice for some reason.
Oh, weird. Yeah, that's I have no words for what just happened. Um, for anyone, and I will fully admit, until the last about 10 minutes of the game, I was one of those people that missed 98% of the game. But I was, of course, following along. The Lions came out to a 7-0 lead thanks to a Nathan Rourke 6-yard run. They then went up 10-0. They're just showing the highlights right now on TSN. They were up 16 to nothing at the half. And then the wheels slowly started to fall off in the third quarter, but the Lions were still able to keep it in check as it was 16-8 at one point. The Lions had a really, really good drive that ended with Nathan Rourke's second rushing touchdown of the game to take a 23-8 lead. And then the fourth quarter happened. The wheels started to fall off for the British Columbia Lions as a 47-yard Mark Leggio field goal made it 23-11. And then after a defensive stop for the Tiger Cats, Keandre Smith was able to, on a third down play, I should mention, almost forgot about that, Cole. On a third down that honestly could have sealed the game for the BC Lions, Keandre Smith with the 6-yard catch, that made it 23-18. The Lions would go 2-out, and then the Tiger Cats would get the ball back. They had a great drive that ended with a 6-yard catch from Brendan O'Leary Orange to make it 24-23. The Lions would score, the Tiger Cats, I should say, would get a 2-point convert to make it 26-23. The Lions drove all the way down to the 3-yard line, but they fell 1 yard short of a first down, forcing Sean White to kick an 11-yard field goal and made it 26 all. They went to overtime. The all-important toss went to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. The Lions were forced to settle for a field goal, and I'm sure something that Cole and I are going to get into. The Tiger Cats would get the ball back. They drove down to the Lions' 5-yard line, and on 2nd and 4, they threw a fade to the end zone. I believe it was Keandre Smith or Leary Orange again that went up for the ball. He very clearly went up for the ball. He jumped for the ball. He batted it out of bounds. The play originally was ruled a clean play, incomplete pass, but the Tiger Cats had not challenged throughout the game. They still had a timeout. They challenged for pass interference. It was overturned, and Ante Milanovic Leatrich hands the Lions. I don't have words right now, Cole. Like I want to say it's their most embarrassing loss of the year, but this team started 5-1, and they're now below 500 at 7-8 and clinging to a home playoff game. You and I very briefly talked before we went live that if the Saskatchewan Roughriders win tomorrow, the Lions no longer control their own destiny in terms of a home playoff game this year, as the Riders will leapfrog the Lions into second place in the Western Division. And the Lions, thanks to an Edmonton Elks loss, would still be in a favorable position to make the playoffs. However, they would be doing so as the third place team in the West. And in saying that, I do have to admit that with this win by the Tiger Cats, they split the season series. Now, the Lions would win the season series due to their higher point differential, and the Tiger Cats would have to finish ahead of the Lions, not just tied the Lions. But with this win, the Tiger Cats are one game back of the BC Lions for potentially third in the Western Division.
Yep, this is a tough one. Hopefully, I'm coming in nice and clear now. I'm definitely not hearing myself twice. Um, this is a tough one because we kind of defended the team last night with the on the preview show of this is a good football team, and a good football team finds a way to close that game out at home. With that lead, it's unfortunate they jump out to I believe it was 10-0 after the first two drives. And ultimately, they're just not able to close things out. And like I said, good teams find a way to win that game, and especially at home, get it across the finish line. And no matter how ugly it might have been there at the end, you know, all we'd remember is a win. And unfortunately, we're just going to remember this as them coming out short and losing in overtime. So this won't be as a traditional post game show. Blake and I'll probably go through things a little bit more quickly. But Blake, what are your thoughts on that more specifically? The Lions get out. I know you were a little bit caught up for a majority of the game, but the Lions get out to a 10-0 start there early on, and things were looking good pretty early on for them after the first two drives. Defense was getting some quick stops, making some plays. Offense was capitalizing on some scoring drives, but one thing that friend of ours, Bobby DeBow, mentioned on Twitter of Rick Campbell kind of settling for some of these field goals that can kind of cost the Lions later down the line. Obviously, I've been kind of feeling opposite, but tonight's a prime example of that kind of costing them. Of maybe in some of those scenarios you can kind of maybe risk it. The percentages are maybe in your favor to go for it on a 3rd and 5 or something like that, instead of settling for a field goal in enemy territory. So, what are your thoughts from the Lions getting out to an early start from a team span standpoint, I guess?
Yeah, no, I thought it was really good for the Lions the way they got out. As you mentioned, that first drive was a touchdown, the 6-yard run, I believe, by Nathan Rourke. And then for the entire first half, they were able to bottle up Bo Levi Mitchell and the Tiger Cats offense. They had a few sacks. Ronald Kent, and it's so unfortunate because everyone's going to remember he's the one that got called for the PI at the end of the game. He had his first career interception in this game in the second quarter. He picked off Bo Levi Mitchell. I believe that led to a Lions field goal that at the time made it 13-0. They would kick one at the end of the half, as I mentioned, to go up 16-0. And it was a really good start for the Lions offensively and defensively. And it's just I don't know about you, Cole, but I'm finding it incredibly hard to even talk about this game right now because it's just, as you said, all we're going to remember is that it was a loss. Like, if the Lions get one stop, even if they get that 3rd and 3 stop on the O'Leary Orange touchdown that made it 23-18, if they get a stop there, they can probably run out the clock, they win the game, and it doesn't matter. But now it matters so much more, and I don't know, like the Lions, you and I have been saying all year that they're a Grey Cup caliber team, but paper doesn't matter. You have to
Mhm.
go prove it on the field. And in the last since they were 5-1, so that's what now
Long
nine
time ago now,
games,
it feels like.
nine games. They're 2-7, 2-7, and
That's
that's not a Grey Cup caliber team. That's how the Hamilton Tiger Cats started the year. That's how the Edmonton Elks started the year. Like I was a little frustrated with the CFL power rankings earlier in this week, and we've talked before about how the power rankings are kind of dumb and whatever. But I think they were right to put the Lions at 7. And if it wasn't for the Calgary Stampeders, they would honestly probably be right to put the Lions at 9 this week after what happened.
yeah. I think probably the other thing that might be the most concerning for Lions fans is that once again this is I don't think a loss you can kind of blame on the offense or the defense, just the team as a whole not being able to offense sustain a drive or two there late in the game, be able to get some first downs to keep Hamilton off the field, and ultimately not send it into overtime and get the victory in overtime. And then defensively, they had a good start to the game. I believe it was 16-0. Hamilton got on the board there in the second quarter, but they were doing their job for majority of the game, and unfortunately, they were not able to get any sort of stops there late in the game when it came to, time to, bow up and kind of, put their foot in the ground and say, Hamilton, you're not going to drive anymore. And we're going to kind of, shut you guys out here. And they weren't able to do that, which is probably the biggest concern that, in my opinion, after tonight's game. So, where was I going to go again? Oh, okay. So, I think kind of one big turning point there early on in the game was Javon Catoy's involvement early on. I know you were
Mhm.
not able to. I'm gonna imagine maybe you listened to the game on radio. So Javon was heavily targeted. I think he had 3 receptions for like 60 or so yards there early on. He ended up leaving the game with an injury, and I think like maybe 2 or 3 plays later, Nathan had targeted Kieran Brisson, who obviously both of us are rooting for, and 2 junior guys kind of Catoy leaving and Bassant having to fill in that role. He unfortunately drops a pass that was put right on the money, and a pass that he might have scored if he was able to catch that ball and turn upfield. What was open in the middle of that zone defense. Rourke hit him and he dropped it. And unfortunately, that's the position I was talking about. Maybe you go for it on third down. I think after that, it's a tough one. Obviously, I'm not no, it's been kind of well said and well documented on this show, this podcast. We're not there. Well, personally, I'm not the biggest, Rick Campbell fan, so I'm not trying to defend him here. But I think after something like that, where you get a drop pass, although it sounds maybe a little bit silly, but kind of the momentum maybe isn't on your side, right? I feel like let's maybe just take a deep breath. Let's go get a field goal, whether it's maybe a conservative approach or not. But were you able to hear that drive and kind of maybe give me your thoughts when you maybe heard that there was a drop pass in the red zone?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear that drive. I didn't know that. I found out about the Katoy involvement early on in the game, and then the injury, unfortunately, to him. He did come back, but they mentioned, I believe it was Ford and Farhan on the call on TSN, and Ford had mentioned there in overtime specifically that Javon Katoy was basically playing on one leg. He the injury, of course, we're not going to know probably tonight. Probably not until the weekend, past the weekend, and then Monday is, of course, the holiday. So we might not find out until Tuesday the severity of the injury. But if he's basically playing on one leg, that was unfortunate for the Lions, and it's it's what you just said. Like the this is stuff that's been plaguing the Lions for over 2 months now. Like the defense can't seem to get a stop when they need it most. And then the offense, when they need to get a drive, can't sustain one. Like the Passant drop. Even I was thinking, I was listening on the radio on the drive home, and the drive after the O'Leary Orange touchdown to make it 23-18, and the Lions went 2-0. Like William Stanback had a run, and that's another thing that's unfortunate about how this game ended. William Stanback went over 100 yards. Congratulations to him on breaking the 1,000-yard barrier again this year. He was a lot more involved in the offense, but he picked up 3 or 4 on first down, and then Nathan Rourke overthrew Justin McInnes on the second down play, and all of a sudden your defense, who just was on the field, they gave up a long drive. They're probably a little bit deflated because they couldn't get the third down stop. All of a sudden has to go back on the field, and this Lions team for the past 9 games now has just not played complementary football.
No. Well said. So to continue on, like I mentioned, after that point, it was 10-0. Lions get a critical drop there in the red zone. Unfortunately, fortunately for them, they need to, find a way to close that game out no matter what. The excuses, whatever you want to call them, they were up 16-0 at one point, and like I said, Grey Cup contending teams would find a way to win that game. So after that touchdown there, it was a lot of punting early on. I don't know if you were able to catch that as well. I want to say there was maybe 7 or 8 punts traded back and forth after the Lions took a 10-0 lead. A lot of 2 and outs there mixed in, and like I said, the defense was playing well. You mentioned Ronald Kent had an interception. I believe they had 3 sacks there going into the fourth quarter. Gary Peters was able to get home. I believe Manuel Gumbo was another one, and then Christian Covington, the guy that has been coming on as of late. And it's unfortunate that in a performance like this, that's nobody's going to remember that Christian Covington's kind of starting to get hot because it might not matter if, the Lions are, you know, barely breathing going into the playoffs, right? And not riding high. So it's unfortunate that I think a lot of good things that could have came out of this game are going to be somewhat erased. Obviously, you can build on some of the things, and I think offensively, it's something I'd like to, kind of bounce off you and get your thoughts of, Alex Hollins obviously went down before the bye week, sustained the shoulder injury versus Toronto in week 15. He has, it's been, known that it's not as serious as anticipated. But he is a missing target who is, I think the legit number two target in this, receiving core. What do you think about your confidence in the receiving core outside of a Justin McInnis? I know we talked about it last night on the preview as well, but we haven't really seen Hatcher and Nathan Rourke on the same page since Hatch is even a little bit with VA and kind of the little bit of stint with the few other backups that we've had when VA did get hurt. What do you think about the kind of receiving core and the ability that other guys can be threats outside of Justin McInnis?
Yeah, it's a good question, Cole, because I did hear the stats right at the end of the game, and Keon Hatcher was targeted. I believe the final total was 6 times, or it might have been 7 times, and he only had 2 catches on the game. He didn't even get a catch until that very final drive that ended up forcing overtime. He ended up getting two very big ones, the second one specifically, that got the Lions inside the 10-yard line. And then he was targeted again in overtime, and he wasn't able to make the catch. We already talked about Kieran Persant. Aiden Eberhardt was another one that you can argue that the ball was overthrown there on the second down in overtime, that forced the Lions to go for a field goal. But I think that it was also catchable. He came out of his break a little bit late. Yeah, I know the ball was a bit high, but the ball seemed to sail right through his hands. And it's just, I don't know who that second guy up right now is because it's very clear that it's not Hatch. And Eberhardt, when he's been called upon, has usually been very reliable. But is it Nathan? Like, is he not putting the ball where the receivers need to be? Or are the receivers not making enough plays that we're used to them making in years past? That's an answer that I don't have for you at this moment, Cole.
Yeah, so it was unfortunate, as you mentioned, some of the numbers here. Starting with Keon Hatcher, he had 7 targets, only caught 2 of his passes for 38 yards. Just not good enough. I know there was some mixed. They all weren't the 5 missed targets all weren't on Keon Hatcher. There was definitely one I remember that was a miss kind of throw by Nathan. There was another one that was a pretty contested ball where Stavros Castatonis came over from a safety position, was able to make a play on the ball when it arrived, knock it loose, and Hatch wasn't able to bring it in. Um, but it just seems like I don't know if it's all on Hatch or just the timing since he's been back with, like I said, whether it been Vernon Adams going down, it kind of went being chased by us a little bit. I see coaches in here celebrating his Scamilton victory with 2-0 this week, boys. Coach, I'm happy for you. I'm sad for us though, having to go down and having to wear this one, especially to Hamilton, who's rolling right now. I believe 4 straight,
4 in a
could
row, yeah.
be 5 of 6 or something like that. They've been playing pretty well here down the stretch, and a game that I didn't see coming after that first half. So, um, as mentioning about the receivers. I definitely question now whether or not Javon Catoy had himself 5. He had 5 targets. He caught all 5 of his targets as always. Very reliable, but a guy that's not very explosive. Right, he does his job in terms of being a very big, utilizing him as a blocker. But as you said, kind of mentioned on the broadcast that he was basically playing on one leg late in the game. Had about 60 of those 80 yards, 4 of those 5 receptions, if I'm not mistaken, early on in the game before he went down. Missed, I believe, most of the second quarter. I would imagine it was actually pretty funny, and I guess we'll talk about bright spots in a little bit, I guess. But the other bright spot of the the punt hitting the scoreboard once again. I don't know if
Yeah.
if you heard or
I
not,
did.
but another legendary call from I forget that referee's name,
Ben
um,
Major.
Ben Major, but the receivers, man, I am struggling to have, gauge my confidence in them going forward. As you mentioned about Aiden Eberhart, reliable, but doesn't get, maybe the opportunity that he should. I think it was given to him tonight, but just wasn't able to connect. Yeah, he had 6 targets for only 2 receptions, 41 yards. Was given a little bit more opportunity tonight, but just wasn't able to, um, you know, like kind of similar to Hatch, wasn't all on him, wasn't all on the quarterback being Nathan. Just was unfortunate. There's a few times there that he was missed, overthrown, like you said, and then also just some tough catches in there that he wasn't able to bring down. So, the receiving core, Stanley Berryhill has 6 receptions on 6 targets, but only for 37 yards, right? And I think we're kind of starting to see that there's not really an explosive threat on this team outside of Alex Hollins when Alex Hollins is on. It seems like he's kind of been banged up even before his injury, and now
Hmm.
having this new injury with the shoulder injury, um, there seems to not really be a field stretcher that can put fear into the defenses that makes them back off. With Justin McInnis and others, obviously they can beat defenders deep, but it's not their strong suit, or it's not their best attribute as a receiver. A lot of those guys are more possession type receivers, especially some of the bigger body guys. Javon, Justin, Hatch is no smaller receiver, right? He's more of a possession type receiver. Aiden's more of that smaller kind of slot possession type receiver as well. And Stanley Berryhill is kind of slotted back into the lineup as supposed to be that kind of deep threat, which not really able to stretch the field. I think teams kind of key in on that, are able to come downhill and really start to jump some of Nathan's throws. And they were mentioning it there with Suter and Farhan on the broadcast that early on there after they took the 10-0 lead, you could see there was times where Nathan had some time, was looking downfield, and there was nothing there, and he was going through his reads, was ended up going through 1, 2, 3 of his reads, and would have to end up checking it down, or it was just getting incomplete. That was during the time where there was probably 7 or 8 punts, multiple possessions back and forth there in the second quarter, traded with punts that they just weren't able to get any sort of traction offensively, either team. And was definitely concerning going forward, especially because it's it's getting time. Like it's kind of you're running out of room margin for error. You've already kind of ran out of margin for error a few weeks ago, but you're getting life support kind of stages now here, like we just
Yeah,
mentioned
like
about.
first place. It was probably gone with the way the Winnipeg's
It's
been playing,
definitely gone now.
but it's you're not hosting the Western Final.
Yeah,
Like that was the final nail in the coffin.
yeah, I agree, and especially how well. I think it's probably a little bit more bitter that Winnipeg played very well. Zach Collaros had a
Yep.
good game for the first time in 17 weeks. Now it's like, oh boy, going into Winnipeg again seems like a very tall task and a very just an unneeded kind of putting another hill in front of the BC Lions to kind of conquer here when it's already hard enough to win a a Grey Cup and a championship. So to kind of continue, as I mentioned, a lot of punts there to end the second half. The Lions defense was able to make some plays. I mentioned the Christian Covington sack. I mentioned the Gary Peters sack. Rugumbo was able to have a sack as well. Ronald Kent with an interception, and as I said, multiple punts, multiple 2 and outs there that they got the Hamilton Tiger Cats offense off the field. Now I will be honest, looking back at it, kind of remembering a few of the throws specifically and stuff like that. 2 or 3 of them where you could definitely put on the shoulders of Bo Levi Mitchell of he was missing his targets there early on. So really was it the defense kind of getting stops, or was it Bo and Hamilton kind of hurting themselves where later in the game they were able to capitalize on some of those opportunities that they had. But uh, early on, the Lions defense was playing very well and able to kind of work in tandem, I guess, with the offense not producing after that 10-0 mark. Ended up getting a few field goals to end the half at 16-0, I believe. Sean White was able to kick a 50-yarder and a 45-yarder as well. And then in the third quarter, Blake, to open up, Bo Levi Mitchell and that offense really started to turn things on. They ended up driving down the field, getting a touchdown drive, which was basically started off by a personal foul, 15-yard penalty on Matthew Betts that gave them a first down, gave them some positive momentum. They were able to continue that, go down the field and get a touchdown. They ended up, at 6 points. It was a 16-6 at that point. Ended up going for two. I don't know if you actually ended up ever seeing this, Blake. You might have
I
heard it on the
did.
radio, but
Yeah.
they ended up the Philly special. They broke out Hamilton. They went with the reverse. Bo Levi Mitchell leaked out to the right side. I believe it would have been right actually to where Blake would
It
have been
would have been,
sitting.
yeah.
Yeah. And Bo Levi Mitchell, who would have thought that he would have caught a touchdown pass and be that wide open? Not that he had to really put any moves or beat anybody deep. He was just wide open based on the scheme of the play. And I might add that it was pretty creative and it was very effective because he was wide ass open. And that kind of sparked things early on for Hamilton. And it seemed like, oh boy, here we go. But BC was able to answer it like right after that with the scoring drive of their own, and getting that lead back to I believe it was 22-8 after that point. Um, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been 22-8 if
20
I had
23
that
to 8.
23-8. Um, and it was like, okay, the Lions are they pulled back to a decent sized margin of uh, you know can they go win this game? And I thought at that point they're going to go win this game, and just that was probably when I thought maybe the most confident I was, and I guess it's crazy what just happened. The last 25 or so minutes there to end the ball game of the Lions not being able to find a way to win that. So what were your thoughts there early on and listening to the game where Hamilton's able to start the third quarter with a touchdown drive of their own, but BC responds and takes that 23-8 lead.
Yeah, I thought, much like you, that when the Lions took that 23 to 8 lead, it was almost money in the bag. Like, I know Hamilton drove or was driving, I should say, to start that fourth to end the third quarter, I should say, and to start that fourth quarter. But I believe Bo Levi Mitchell was sacked at one point, and that ended up ultimately forcing the Mark Leggio field goal to make it 23 to 11. And at that point, I thought, you know what? This defense, they've only given up 11 points so far after three quarters. They're going to be able to steer it home. And then after that first touchdown, that's when I started to get nervous. I'm like, uh-oh, like the Lions need a big drive here. They need to get a couple first downs. They need to waste clock. I was hoping maybe they could even kick a field goal then to make it an 8-point lead. Obviously that wasn't the case. And it's just they said right at the end of the broadcast that Bo Levi Mitchell finished 29 for his last 30. So out of his last 30
And and
attempts, he had,
and that one incompletion, what that should have been a catch.
yeah, it was a drop by James
Yeah,
Tuck. So
yeah,
he should have been 30 for 30 to end the game.
yeah,
And that's simply not good enough from the Lions defense.
yeah. Well, I will credit Bo Levi Mitchell, who we've really enjoyed his performance here. His kind of blast of the past. He's had all season. That being said, this is a drive that you need to or a half that you need to find a way to break up some passes, get some pressure on Levi Mitchell. He cannot go virtually 30 for 30. If we look at it, Blake, he was 30 for 30 because
Mm-hmm.
James Tucker, as you said, dropped the ball, was the right read, was a good ball, wasn't a low pass, was right in the bread basket. He dropped the ball. And I think this was I don't know if I heard correctly. The CFL record I believe was 23 straight completions. If I think I
That
heard that
sounds about right.
correctly.
Yeah.
So considering that he topped that by seven more is just not acceptable. And I would imagine we've kind of it's unfortunate that we've had to say this multiple times that there's no bigger critic than Ryan Phillips, and I'm sure he's getting at them, but it's like it's almost getting old at this point where there's not really any connections or corrections, excuse me, being made, or just maybe it's the guys that we have and not being able to just that's what they got, that's to um their standard, I guess. But I guess this is kind of where things get ugly, Blake. And Um, from here, you know, I believe Hamilton was able to, uh, like I was saying earlier, 18 points in the fourth quarter. They ended up finishing the drive that bridged the third quarter into the fourth quarter with a field goal, and then things really just took off from there. And what were your thoughts when things were starting to spiral out of control? It seemed like you know, it was almost one thing after another, and then oh boy, here comes Hamilton. And what were your thoughts there in the fourth quarter when they started to make their comeback?
Yeah, I was nervous, like especially after that first touchdown. I thought, "Oh no, like here we go again." Like this is somehow this some way this is gonna happen again. And I didn't know exactly how it was gonna happen. But like even in overtime, like on the review, Suter was saying one thing, Farhan was kind of saying another, and I was like, just just for the sheer fact that the way the Lions past couple of months has been going, it's going to be called PI. Like it might not even be PI. And the call on the field was a good, clean play. But just the way the Lions season is going, it's going to be called PI. They're going to punch it in from the 1 yard line and they're going to win the game. And that's exactly what happened. Like,
Yeah,
it's like, I thought I was desperately hoping that, as I said a little while ago, that that drive after the first touchdown that made it a 5 point game, I was hoping the Lions would have one of those season defining drives, if you will. That, you, like I said, you get three, four first downs, you waste almost the entire clock. If you have to kick a field goal, you kick a field goal. But that wasn't the case. They went two and out, and almost as soon as they went two and out, I had this pit in my stomach that I knew we were gonna lose.
yeah. So the fourth quarter was, and by the way, Blake, I am not yawning at your responses. I am just
No,
that
no.
tired, buddy. I've been up since 5:30, so I am so ready to go to bed after this late night edition of the post game recap. You know, I've said multiple times that, more often than not, these are good to kind of, vent to get some things off our chest. But tonight is very much all bitter and not much sweet after this one because there's not really many linings to, losses like this going
Nope.
forward because there's no more margin for error going forward here. The Lions need to really figure their shit out. And losing a game like this, there's no the Lions lost, but it's the Lions lost. That's the end of the story right there. Is they lost. They didn't find a way to win. It's not okay and it's not acceptable. So this team needs to, really take a good look in the mirror here because their season's slipping away faster than I think you and I maybe like to admit, and maybe them in that locker room need to kind of look themselves in the mirror and really, it's gut check time, fellas. That you know yes, on paper, like Blake said, we can talk all day about talent and how good this team is, but that does not mean that you can just go out and, roll out the balls and you're just gonna, win a lot of games and go win a championship. You need to, dial in, make sure that you're playing good football, and the Lions just really aren't playing good football the last, as you said, 9 weeks, 2-7. That's not a month sample size. That's a long sample size of not playing good football. And at a certain point, we've said it a lot by Calgary, Edmonton a little bit, Hamilton even to an extent. You are what your record is, and at this point, the Lions are a 2-17 in the last 9 games, and 7-8 now on the season. They're just not good enough, and just not finding ways to win. So the Lions did not help themselves out in the fourth quarter, going 2-out. They had three possessions in the fourth quarter, 2-out twice, and then the final drive to force things into overtime. Hamilton was able to score, I believe, two touchdowns and a 2-point conversion in there in the fourth quarter, actually, and the field goal as well, 18 points total, and force things into overtime, making a thrilling comeback for them and their fan base to extend their playoff hopes even more to staying alive in the East. If they lost, I think it was all over for everything, if I'm not mistaken. But staying alive for that crossover as well. For who you never know what's going to happen, and I think you and I are going to have to become pretty big Ottawa fans tomorrow, and hope
Yeah.
Saskatchewan isn't able to pull that one out. But as we talked
And
about on the
even
week.
if the Riders do win, I know it's doom and gloom, and it rightfully so. But even if the Riders do win, the Lions control their own destiny in terms of hosting a playoff game, because if they win out, they will finish in second because they have that game against the Riders,
Saskatchewan.
which means they'll beat the Stamps, they'll beat the Riders, and they would beat Montreal. They will finish second in the West. But this is not a team right now that I believe is capable of winning out. Do I believe they can still beat Calgary next week? Yes, I do. Am I confident in that though? No, I'm not. And
Yeah.
it really depends on what happens because um the Riders maybe they are like the Elks where the Elks beat Calgary twice. They beat Hamilton once, and everyone kind of thought when Hamilton before they had turned it around, they had turned a corner, and then they get beat. I wouldn't say handily. It was a very close game until the fourth quarter last week, but they got absolutely demolished by the Bombers today. So one game for the Riders beating the Stampeders does not prove they are back to form. But if they can beat the Red Blacks, I believe that does entail that they are back to form.
Yeah. So, don't want to really rehash overtime and what happened in it too much. We obviously started with possession of the football. Um, basically look out of sorts to start. I think we had one completion and three incompletions, if I'm not mistaken. End up settling for a field goal, and at that point, I knew it was over because kicking a field goal, you're pretty much hoping that they're going to miss a field goal, pretty much because they're in. You start in field goal
Either
range,
that or you're going to
essentially.
double overtime.
Yeah. So, just wasn't a promising start after, incompletion. I think there was a completion and then 2 incompletions, and then we're kicking a field goal. And we had basically been a leaking faucet. We had not been able to stop anything, in that 4th quarter. So it was like, well, the writing's kind of on the wall here. I would imagine Hamilton's gonna find a way to score on this drive. They end up getting the pass interference that, ends up not giving them a touchdown, but, getting them in position to score a touchdown on the very next play and win the game. Unfortunate for Ronald Kent, who I thought had actually a pretty good, evening and played very well, but probably more often than not, or more fans are gonna, remember that final play in overtime that essentially cost the Lions in the bigger picture. But like I said, I think he had a good game and was, better than just that one play that will define him, unfortunately. But what were your thoughts, man? 32-29, and like I said, this one usually we can, say that this is a little bit therapeutic. This one's gonna sting and be one that I want to flush hopefully and move on to next week, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm ready to move on to next week. I feel really bad, and I know none of the players are going to watch this, obviously. Um, they're probably slowly making their way out of BC Place. I would imagine RP and Rick Campbell had a very serious talk. Maybe there was some yelling, screaming. You hear all the time about those players only meetings. Maybe that happened as well. But Ronald Kent, I really do feel like he had a good game, and they showed him multiple times after the call was made and then on the sideline after the touchdown. This isn't going to define you, Ronald Kent. Like, it sucks that I don't have another way of putting it, but you personally are going to feel like you cost your team the game. Make make that make you better. Like next week, if you get back in the lineup, try and make up for it. This week you had one interception. Next week, try and get two. Like this does not define you. You are a good halfback. The Lions released um it wasn't Jalen Edwards Cooper, but it was the veteran in
Um,
camp.
Marcus
He was
Sales.
Marcus Sales, thank you. They released Marcus Sales because they believed in you that much. This team knows that that was not on you. And even though you are going to feel like it, you need to make it up next week. This whole team needs to make up for that entire fourth quarter and overtime next week. If they don't win by 20 points, I'll say, against the Stampeders, I think it's a disappointment. And at this point, like winning by one or winning by 20, you need to win the game. But the Lions need to demolish the Stampeders. They need to play pissed off. We've been saying that for a few weeks, and it just continually does not happen.
They need to play the more desperate team, and it's just not happening. Um, 14 total punts overall, 7 for each team. The Lions had 7 punts after starting the game off with 2 scoring drives. As I mentioned, they were able to get 2 more field goals late in that first half. And then just from that point on, a lot of punting for the BC Lions. They were able to get that third touchdown of the game, I believe, in
Hmm.
the third quarter with the Nathan Rourke, another Nathan Rourke rushing touchdown. But after that, like I said, a whole lot of punts, a whole of not being able to be productive offensively, and I think that's going to be a problem, which now is going to add to the questions that I think are you know acceptable. I think they're kind of unnecessary when you're winning games, but when you're losing, the questions are going to be asked. Who's going to be starting at quarterback next week, right? When you have to win these games, we've seen it now in the last few weeks with Edmonton having to go back and forth, make tough decisions, go back to Trey Ford after he's injured, give it to MBT, go back and forth. The Lions have 2 starting caliber quarterbacks. Are you going to make the call? I'm curious what's going to happen because obviously we didn't see really Vern Adams in any sort of capacity, not even in short yardage, which I thought was pretty curious. But there's no more room for margin, no more room for error, like I said multiple times. So what do the Lions do now from this point on? Where you have a Calgary next week, Saskatchewan after that, and then Montreal to finish the year. You know, is it enough, to get VA back ramped up once again? Because we saw what he looked like last week, and it was, a little bit rusty after, missing some games after being on the sidelines, which is, I think, very like normal, right? Like he
Hmm.
hasn't played in a while. It takes a little bit of time to get your feel and rhythm back going. So um, it's I feel like it's not a guarantee that, VA goes back in there and looks good. And also, the thing that I think has hampered this team all year, the sacks and the offensive line not being able to, be up to standard in critical times when, maybe for a majority of the game they did a pretty good job, but critical times getting sacked and giving up sacks is just a tough mistake and tough to really, fault your quarterback for, being on his back when, he's got to, read the defense and try to make throws downfield when the other teams are getting a bunch of pressure on them. So I'm curious what happens at quarterback, Blake. But what are your thoughts? Because I'm sure it's going to be a talking point. We should, at least talk about it here to kind of end the show a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about a few other things, but specifically, what are your thoughts on the quarterback position in BC?
Yeah, I think Nathan will get the start next week. This loss was obviously not on Nathan. He doesn't play defense, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So do you play with VA? Like I don't know at this point. Um, both like we've seen. We talked about it on the weekly show. We've seen pretty much four teams now run with the two quarterback system, and it hasn't worked for any of them. Like the Elks, they've tried it, hasn't worked for
Doesn't
them.
It
It
doesn't work.
hasn't worked.
You can't name basically any team in history, man. It's just it's a
Mhm.
tough one to do, and it's a good thing to have, but it's just tough, man.
Yeah, like it hasn't worked for the Lions, hasn't worked for the Riders, and didn't really work for Hamilton when they tried it with Bo Levi and Taylor Powell. So those are the four teams, and I don't know. Like I said, I think Nathan will get the start, but much like this week, if the game doesn't start well, which is the opposite of this week, the game did start well. Then do the Lions go to VA? Maybe. Like I don't know. I don't have the answers at this point.
See, Nathan, obviously the final stat shows that he had 2 touchdowns accounted for on the evening, but none through the air. 2 on the ground where he was sneaking them in. One, I think, was 7 or 8 yards out. The other one was closer to the goal line. Not throwing a touchdown pass once again. Your main responsibility as a quarterback is to, obviously throw the ball through the air. And I think that's something that, probably we need to be a little bit better at if we're being 100% honest. Of being able to convert some of those drives into touchdowns and keeping the offense in the field, and you know maybe leave the excuses, I guess, for us, and maybe just produce. I guess if we're being 100% honest with ourselves. So um, I guess kind of to finish off, buddy, there's not really too much more to be said other than I would love to just forget about this one, enjoy the rest of the weekend. There was some fabulous Canada West action here tonight, Blake. Saskatchewan won a
Yeah,
thriller.
Saskatchewan came back and upset
Yes,
Alberta.
47-yard field goal with about a minute to go. Alberta got the ball, drove down the field. They had a crack at a 46-yard field goal. They ended up pushing it wide right, and Saskatchewan got a victory. There is now 4 teams in the Canada West with, I think, 2 victories. If
Hmm.
Calgary can beat UBC tomorrow, there'll be
It would
5
be
teams in the
5
Canada West
out of
with
6.
2 victories, which is crazy to think about. The chaos in the Canada West has been just unbelievable this season, and adds to the entertainment, the drama, and all that, you name it. So that is what I'm hoping to do after this, Blake. This has not been therapeutic, to be honest. This has been hard to rehash what just we just watched. I we were planning to go live at about 10:30. Obviously, the game extended a little bit longer, but wanted to go to like the plan was to go right away after the game, but I had to like, what the hell did we just watch before we went live here? Compose myself a little bit so I didn't say something, I guess, that maybe we'd regret a little bit later. But all jokes aside, man, I'm ready to go enjoy the rest of my weekend, watch some NFL on Sunday, watch some Canadian football tomorrow. Like I've said on the weekly show multiple times, on all of our kind of shows throughout the it's on the channel here. There's no games that you have to tune away from in the CFL now. Tomorrow, especially with us kind of being Ottawa fans tomorrow and rooting
Yeah,
and trying to um, keep the Lions in second place for at least another week, and stay ahead of Saskatchewan, because I think that is something we don't want to go to Saskatchewan in the
no.
playoffs. And you know obviously I know Shane's told us to we can't say necessarily that it's a lock that we're going to lose in third place because of Montreal and stuff like that, teams in the past showing that they can make runs. Winnipeg 2019 or whatever, but
I
you
believe
know
Hamilton might have done it in 2014 as well. I remember another team in the not so distant future.
a very hard thing to do though, and especially the way BC would be doing it is they would be trending a very downward, as we mentioned, 2-7 in their last few games. If they were to surrender that second seed to Saskatchewan, I would imagine that chalks up another 2 more losses at least in there. So I would think you fall to, let's say, 4
8 and
and
10.
11 or something like that in your final whatever it may be, excuse me, 4 and 9, I guess it would what it would be after 2-7. So just would not be pretty going into the playoffs. And I think at that point you got to be more realistic that this is a very much a long shot. Obviously, things can happen on any given Saturday, on any given Sunday, but you want to make sure that you give your chance or give yourself the best opportunity to win and play at home, and make sure there's no elements involved having to go into the prairies during winter time or early winter, and make sure that you can play in a BC place and have your offense not altered by any sort of elements outside in a Canadian prairie winter. So last bright spot, I guess, before we get out of here, Blake, William Stanback, over 1,000 yards, 100 yards on the night. I think he had 15 carries for, I think, 103 or something like that, just over 100 yards. But I think we said that he needed 41 on the evening. I know they
Hmm.
made a little announcement on the jumbotron there in the first half that William Stanback had eclipsed 1,000 yards. He was running very hard early on, had been giving the lines some nice manageable down and distance there on second down, running very hard. And there was one drive there. I think it was the 2-yard rushing touchdown by Nathan Rourke, where I tweeted about it. Very balanced drive of the BC Lions. Were spreading the ball around. Was probably their best drive of the night, outside of maybe that the third quarter touchdown drive as well was a nice one. That was a nice, very balanced one as well. But the one there in the second quarter that I'm thinking of was a bigger play I think to Aiden Eberhard on that drive, a pair of nice runs by William Stanback, and then there was another one where he lost his helmet and probably could have kept going if not kind of surrendering a little bit, and not surrendering a little bit, but just kind of realizing that his helmet was off and there was some defenders around him. So I think he could have probably turned out another maybe 2 or 3 yards on that carry if his helmet didn't pop off. So very good to see William Stanback be featured once again. I know business as usual and the three keys to the success for the BC Lions on your part this week with William Stanback being number one. We were able to do that. Unfortunately, they were not able to win the game. So what were your thoughts on William Stanback and his performance?
Yeah, I was really happy to see William Stanback get back in the swing of things after um, the performance that was not good enough by the whole team. Really, I feel like they failed William Stanback 2 weeks ago because they got down a little bit early and then they just stopped going to him. But it was really nice to see him get over 100 yards. But again, they abandoned him late in that game. Like he had the one rush on the first down play, and then he didn't get the what he needed. Like he only got 3 or 4 yards, so they were forced to pass. That was incomplete. And then on the last drive, they're of course forced to pass because they're racing against the clock. And then in overtime, they didn't go to him either, as all four of their plays were on in the air, I should say, and they didn't even try and get William Stanback the ball. A big bruising running back like that in overtime, when the other team's defense is probably tired. I might have gone to it, maybe not necessarily on a second down, but at least on a first down, like try and get him involved a little bit. So that was some interesting play calling, but overall, I think William Stanback had a really good game. And during this current slide, he's been the one constant bright spot for the BC Lions.
Yep. So, I think let's put a bow on this thing, buddy, and get out of here before midnight because I would love to go get some sleep. Um, any final thoughts in terms of the BC Lions falling to 7-8 after a 32-29 loss to the Hamilton Tiger Cats?
Let's forget about this. Let's enjoy some junior football in Canada West and NFL this weekend and get ready for Calgary. Like we've been saying it for a few weeks, but your season is truly on the line at this point. You cannot afford any more games like this.
Yep. And you know, it's going to be interesting because teams are starting to get hot and you're starting to, trend in the exact opposite direction, which is at the worst possible time of year. We also saw, some injuries happen. Hopefully, we're able to sustain those. Tyler Packer, as we mentioned multiple times as well, Javon Katoy battling through injury. Hopefully, those are nothing too serious because, Katoy, even though he, didn't play a majority of that, middle part of the game, second and third quarter, finished the game with I think 5 receptions, 81 total yards. Almost to a 100-yard game, and it's going to be a big time loss if Holland is out, Katoy is out. Hopefully Packers, I don't know if they announced officially what it was, but just returned back into the lineup after a head injury the last 2 weeks and had missed. Jarrell Broxton obviously has been out of the lineup, and Chris Slugger, I thought he had a better performance here tonight, but a depth lineman filling in. The injury starting to add up for the Lions now a little bit. Not nearly to the extent of an Ottawa Red Blacks team, but definitely starting to pile up in terms of some of the key players going down. I know we saw a little bit of Ben Hladek, probably not as much as I actually anticipated, but we saw a little bit of him in the second half. I know he was involved on one tackle that I can remember more specifically, but other than that, Blake, I totally agree with you, man. I am so tired. I want to forget about this one and hit the sack. Enjoy some football this weekend. Also, enjoy a 3-day weekend. I hope you have Monday off as well. I don't know if your job does as well.
I'm
Oh, that's
back to work tomorrow, so
back to work tomorrow, unfortunately for you, which I actually should have known because we had to do post game tonight. So, buddy, enjoy your work day. Um, I'm looking forward to watching the football games and kicking back. I don't have too many plans. Actually, might make it out to the Clippers game tomorrow night. if I'm not too caught up in the action and whatnot. And then Sunday, obviously enjoying some football. And Monday, I'm actually going to do nothing but do some stuff, prepare for the show on Wednesday, stuff like that. Just enjoy a nice, well-needed day off. So, Blake, I think that'll be all for us here on the late night show, BC Lions post game after dark. Maybe we'll call it. As always, we appreciate you guys. If you guys could like, comment, subscribe. We could not do this without you guys. Smash the subscribe button, Blake, as always. Press the notification bell. You guys will get notified every time we go live. I know I was having some difficulties. Unfortunately, I think we couldn't go. We had to cancel the our streaming through Instagram here tonight. We were streaming through Instagram to start the show, but I was having some technical difficulties. I was hearing myself twice. It was messing with me, and unfortunately, I don't think we were able to stream on Instagram here tonight. But please, we'd appreciate you guys if you could follow us on social media platforms at Canadian Football Fanatics on Instagram, at underscore CF Fanatics on Twitter/X. So that will do it for Blake and I here tonight, and we will see you guys next Wednesday night on the weekly show.